Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes, and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
On the show with us today is Brant Cooper, the co-founder of Moves the Needle, which has advised the innovation practices of such leading companies as GE, Intuit, Capital One, ING, and Cisco. He helps organizations, big and small, create value. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Lean Entrepreneur. He's a thought leader in corporate innovation and is a sought-after speaker, advisor, and mentor. He has over 20 years' experience helping companies bring high-growth products to market. His startup career includes Tumbleweed, Timestamp, Wild Packets, Encode, and many others. He has experienced IPO, acquisition, rapid growth, and crushing failure, which we will get into today. Brant is also the author of The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, the first purpose-driven book or the purpose-written book to discuss lean startup and customer development concepts, which has sold over 100,000 copies. He has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs across the globe. Welcome to the show, Grant.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Well, kind of fill us in a little bit on some of the gaps that I didn't really talk about during that introduction about, where you've been and what kind of has brought you to the point where you are now.
Yeah, sure. Well, so, back in the startup career, I guess we're going to get into the failure part, but failure is such a common part of startups generally. And I lived and breathed that for, many years during the dot-com boom and bust. And back in those days, we tried to teach startup entrepreneurs, we tried to teach the startup people how to look and act like a big business. And this, despite the fact that big businesses often fail as well when they're launching new products. But the very structure, how you're going to formulate your company, we try to make them look like big companies. And yet startups aren't like big companies. They don't have known markets, known blueprint on how to capitalize on those markets. So they really need to be organized and operate differently. And so there was a bunch of different people talking about this and writing about it after the dot-com bust. And I was one of those and launched a marketing service called Sales and Marketing R&D, which was trying to bring an iterative product development type of mentality to building a business. And I was turned on to Steve Blank, and Eric Ries was just starting to blog about it, who's the author of The Lean Startup. And so I jumped in and wrote the first book that sort of summarized all of those concepts and launched off on this career. Back in those days, it was all about startups. And then, when Eric Ries's book, Lean Startup, really did really well, just kind of wildfire, and C-suites all over the world were reading that. Then we thought it's like, okay, it's just for big companies that are trying to do breakthrough innovation. But I guess it's evolved to the point now where I think about these topics in terms of where do you face uncertainty, and really anywhere in your life, but certainly anywhere in business, whether you're trying to do something small and near term, you still face uncertainty. And of course, if you're trying to do quote unquote innovation that's new growth for 5 or 6 years down the road, then it's massive amounts of uncertainty. But you can't just execute through uncertainty. You have to use these sort of learning iterative principles we call search mode when facing uncertainty. And so now I believe it's applicable in all sorts of areas across all enterprises. And really that's what Moves the Needle focuses on.
Sure. And is Moves the Needle really more focused on startup entrepreneurs, or are they more looking at startup products, or is it kind of both?
It's all helping large enterprises find new revenue sources or to reduce uncertainty even in existing products. Most of it is innovation. Most of it is new product development, but it's all with the large enterprises. I'm fortunate enough, I get to travel around and go to conferences and speak and do all of those great things. And so I give back to the entrepreneurial world. I try to do talks for free and do mentoring and advising for free in the startup world. But the business itself, Moves the Needle, is about the large enterprises.
Okay. And so obviously along this pathway that you've taken to get to the point now where you're primarily focusing on these, larger organizations and enterprises to do product innovation, what are some of the tough decisions that you have faced along the way? I mean, obviously we kind of touched on, some of the failures. So do you have a tough decision or one of those hard decisions that you had to make earlier on in your career in this space that, that did not go so well for you?
Well, there's a lot of examples. I think in the beginning, I reinvented myself after the dot-com crash, and I kind of didn't want to go back and do the same thing. And so when I sort of reinvented myself, I was literally starting at ground zero. And so, that's kind of that scary entrepreneurial minded time where you don't really have a safety net, right? And so that's kind of where I was and started the book and really started to help startups all over the place. So I think that I have a passion for startups. And so there was a decision there. Well, startups really don't have money, especially, post this last recession, which was really when the business got going. And so, you can't do just what you're passionate about. You have to be passionate about what you do. And so to me, the business model was with large enterprises, but it was also, my passion. I was leaving the passion of the startup world to go after and help these large enterprises. So that was a tough decision. But once I did that, there's co-founder issues. There's trying to hire a traditional VP of sales that didn't work out and led to just a horrible year of tightening our belts and really wondering if the business was going to survive. I think that's like maybe the toughest thing over the last several years. That was back in 2016, I believe. And so that was a strategy that we chose. Okay, we're going to, build out an enterprise sales team, which is expensive. And it failed miserably and arguably almost sunk the company.
Wow. So back in 2016, what were some of the decisions that you had to make to get yourself out of that rut? Obviously, it's the personnel thing because obviously that's the most expensive piece of an organization.
Isn't that the hardest part, though? I mean, that's
it is.
I just, you feel so much responsibility for the people that you employ. And, this person was a good person. It was just the wrong model. It was the wrong person, good person, wrong person, but also the wrong model. And so we scrapped the model. So there was the personnel part, which I find very difficult to do. But there was also the tightening the belt part and really looking at the way we managed our finances. And my philosophy then was not to let people go. So my philosophy was we got into a financial situation because of me, because of my decisions. I wasn't going to punish somebody else. So my co-founder and I took pay cuts, drastic pay cuts. And we asked others to take pay cuts too. The more senior you were, the more, the heftier your pay cuts, and really got everybody focusing on new business development. So
how many people were in the organization prior to 2016?
So 2016, we probably had 6 full-time employees and another 6 or so contractors, but we're not full-time.
Sure. And so when you talk about you had to change the model of what you were doing, can you describe what the model was and when you came to that decision of needing to change it and how you changed it?
So we practice what we preach. I'm always in this search mode. My co-founder really more manages the execution mode. And in search mode, I'm looking for new ways to grow. So what can we do business model wise? What can we do, structurally? What can we do new products wise to find growth again? And so I had a thesis that I tested in late 2015 that I could hire salespeople and they could go and close deals for us. Now, this is the business that we're in, teaching people entrepreneurship, workshops, running accelerator programs is a very relationship-driven business. And the obstacles and method of selling and what you're selling is way different in the innovation space than it is in, say, just a product space, which is, what I did back in the startup days. And so the hypothesis was that we could hire these salespeople. I went and hired the VP of sales and started hiring these salespeople, and they couldn't sell. It was just too relationship driven. You had to be too close to the innovation mindset. You had to be too much of an entrepreneur or an innovation person yourself to close these deals. And so that was a model that cost us a lot of money. And also it meant that our sales were down because my co-founder and I were trying to take a step back a little bit to allow, to create this capacity that the sales team could grow into. So when that failed, then it's on to what do I think the next model is? And so that's getting Aaron and myself, my co-founder and I, back out doing heavy duty selling. But it's also creating a structure inside the company that allows us to be free to do more selling. So we had to stop selling our own implementation. We had to stop selling our own services. We had to hire other people that could do the implementation. And then as those people matured, we taught those people how to sell. And then we had to hire a layer below them. So, I guess I probably could have read a couple of pretty good books that would have shared all of this with me, but nothing like learning by doing. And so the model that we have now is that the coaches themselves do the implementation. As they mature and understand more, then they start forming relationships and start going and doing selling, and that they become this principal level. And then we've got the partnership at the top, which is really opening up brand new areas of business.
So how many people do you have working for you today?
Today we have 16 full-time employees and probably 15 part-time contractors around the world.
And you're actually making money now, not having to worry about how to pay them.
We're actually a healthy company with good financial reporting and making money.
And so when you have a new person that you bring on, just kind of shifting gears a little bit, obviously there are some decisions or some questions that they bring to the table or that maybe they're not asking. Really is what I should be asking you is what are some questions that people should be asking somebody like yourself when trying to, hire you to work for them?
I think that from their perspective, they need to understand what the vision is. As a hiring person, my brand is my culture, right? My relationship with my employees is my culture. And so the two things I want them to be is bought into my vision. And number two, I want them to be excited about being a part of that, because not only are they going to be independent and able to create value and to, be creative, they're also I'm going to share in the upside. If we go on this journey together and we succeed, you're going to share on the upside. This isn't all about me. We're going to go try to change the world, and I want you to be part of the vision. And if you're enthusiastic and passionate about that and you work hard and we're all successful, you're going to share in that. So from the interviewee's perspective, I think that that's what I would want to hear from them, is that they're asking me questions that says, what's your vision and what is the outcome and what's the mission statement of the company and how long is it going to take to get there and what are we doing in the near term and what is your management philosophy and how am I going to grow here and how am I going to share when we're successful.
And with the company Moves the Needle, and you're trying to teach, because you're teaching these lean startup, concepts to organizations that are already, in place and are successful, but you're teaching them some of these lean startup principles, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And so how can an organization like, Capital One and these large organizations like Edmunds and things like that you've actually worked with, how do you teach them some of these lean startup principles, and how does that affect that organization?
Well, so, they have a why as well. So their why is maybe they're being disrupted. Edmunds, when they were a completely advertising based, website is how they made their money. And when things shifted to mobile and they had all sorts of new competitors there, that wasn't working anymore. And so they had to completely reinvent their business model. And so what we do with a company like that is we run a bunch of workshops. And in these workshops or sprints, they're not just learning concepts. They're putting those concepts into practice. They are going out in the real world and getting empathy for their customers. They're going out into the real world and they're talking to dealerships and they're understanding the technology in dealerships. We teach them experiments. So if they have an idea, we're going to take what's the riskiest assumption and we're going to run an experiment to see if they can kind of by hook or crook demonstrate what the value is of that idea before you spend tons of money on implementing it. And so that's exactly what Edmunds did, is they generated evidence that suggests that they could work with dealers' tech to get actual fixed prices on cars. So if you bought a car or you wanted a car and you saw it on the Edmunds site and you showed up on site, you would get this price without having to haggle and that sort of thing. So they learned about the haggling via empathy work. They learned about the tech via running experiments and going out and doing work with the dealerships. And then they use this evidence to make decisions about how they go forward. And so that's what we bring to large enterprises, and we bring it to the front lines, and we bring it to the C-suite and everything in between. And again, it can be internal processes or customer-facing products. And the key is to figure out where their riskiest assumptions are and run experiments to validate or invalidate them.
So it kind of sounds to me like you're taking, organizations that are, enterprise level organizations that are really facing a tough decision about where they're going to go in the future, and creating those experiments and kind of, almost like beta testing those decisions before they actually make a final decision on things.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, that in execution mode, smart people sit around in a room and they can think through the problem and they can decide what they're going to do. If you face uncertainty, you can't just think harder. Thinking harder doesn't allow you to predict the future. So you actually have to work differently. And so in that part where there's uncertainty, where you don't have the facts, where you don't know what the market response is, then you can go out and use the empathy practices and run these experiments to generate market evidence that allows you now to have this data and insights from the market. And now you smart people with these insights and this data can make the right decisions because you're smart people. But you can't do that if you're facing uncertainty. And that's the mindset that's different in today's world, is we all face uncertainty. So smart people can't predict the future. So just thinking harder does not allow you to reduce uncertainty.
Yeah, and putting 5 people in a room or 10 people in a room doesn't reduce that uncertainty either.
Exactly.
So what would you say are some tools or some tips that, our listeners can use to ignite that entrepreneurial spirit within their organization, no matter what level they're at?
The first thing that I usually get people to do is try to do some empathy work. It's amazing to me that empathy has almost become a buzzword. In some ways, that's really good, though, because even if people practice empathy bad, they're at least talking to their customers or trying to figure it out, right? Which is a good thing. But so I think for your listeners, it's stop being in selling mode for a moment. Stop being in I'm pitching my solution, and go into understanding their problem mode and go deep into their problems. It's not just the I need to save money or I need to save time. It's wow, if I could accomplish this in my career, I could take my family to Italy in the summers. It's something that's more aspirational. So there's the utility problem. Yes, this problem X needs to be solved, but there's also this impact and this aspirational aspect of what does solving that problem mean? And so people need to go deep with their customers and understand what their priorities are. So you've probably heard of this, Dan, but there's this flipping the conversation tactic that many salespeople use, as well as people doing empathy work can do. And that's basically quick introduction of myself. Here are the 3 or 4 problems I think that you might have. Do you have them? Hi, I'm Brant Cooper. I'm CEO of Moves the Needle. When I talk to innovation executives like yourself, what I hear is that you're being disrupted, and your company can't move fast enough and doesn't know how to incorporate new information from the market into their existing processes or inside their existing products. Do you face those? So it's not pitching a solution. It's getting to the heart of the problem. And what is the response? The response is, no, I don't have that problem. And then that's fine. You know that that's not your customer. Or, yeah, I have those for sure. But what really is pressing is this problem over here. So then maybe you can address it. Maybe not, but even if you can't, you know that it's a higher priority than what you're trying to solve. And the third is, yeah, I really do have that problem. And now you have an opportunity to go in and dive deeper to understand it, and try to come up with with insights. In today's world, to me, insights about your customer is your competitive advantage way more than your technology is.
And that's a very good thing to talk about, because when you're talking about trying to, in your space, you're obviously at the enterprise level, but even at the small business level, when you're trying to sell something or whatever, you have to find their why in order to quote unquote sell them something. And I'm a big believer in that. If you can actually figure out what their pain point is, and you can start to press that pain point and show them how your solution will help them, meet those pain points. Because, I have, medical offices here in South Carolina. And so when patients come into our office, a lot of times when we're asking them questions about what's wrong with them, they'll tell us, that oh, my lower back hurts. Well, the reason why they're here is because their lower back hurts, but that's not really the reason why they're here. They're here because their lower back pain is preventing them from being able to do something. And until you can figure out what that is, you'll never meet that motivational pain point of being able to spend money to solve a problem until you get to the root of that particular issue and that particular pain problem. And it works the same way in the enterprise level as well.
Yeah, it does. That's a great example. I used in the first edition of my book, I used a medical example because of my sister is a cardiologist, and she also does palliative care. And so, there are, present company accepted, but there are doctors that miss the empathy point. And it's like, okay, I'm going to solve this problem with this medication or with this or with that, without actually looking into, well, what is that? How does that affect the whole life? How does that affect your ability to, be the person that you are? And those questions are important to answer.
And a lot of times we don't go far enough, because sometimes people will come in and they'll say, oh, my lower back pain. You're like, oh, if we could fix your lower back pain, what will that do for you? Oh, that will allow me to be able to work out again and lose some of the weight that I've been holding on. And of course, that's going to help the lower back pain. And so If we can help your lower back pain and it can help allow you to exercise, what's that going to allow you to do? Exactly. Well, it's going to allow me to, for a female, we've heard before where, oh, well, that's going to allow me to be able to look better for my spouse, which we haven't made love in 6 years. And so that's really the pain point is that they really want to be able to make love with their spouse that they haven't in 6 years because they feel like their physique is not to the point where they can actually do that. So you fix that low back pain, not only does it allow them to, work out again, but that's not really why they're doing it. They're trying to fix their back pain. It's to be able to build and continue to nurture the relationship with their spouse.
Yeah, that's right. And what's amazing about that is that that's what creates passionate customers, right? So that's not just the satisfied customer. That's the ones that are like lifelong loyal to whoever provided that solution. It forms a bond that, it's all about that relationship. And if you can help people achieve their aspirations, or really, frankly, even being on the journey to achieving the aspiration, then those customers are going to be your most loyal customers.
Can you share with us a strategy that you do or that you use when facing a tough decision?
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to say that it depends on whether it's in that uncertainty realm or it's in the execution realm. I try to work with others. I try to collaborate with others to get their input. But as the leader, I get to ignore their input. So I'm doing that to check myself, right? Am I missing something? Am I way off base here? What have I not considered? And so I'm going to go, sort of outside my own, gray matter, outside between my ears to try to see if I'm looking at this properly. But once I feel like I've incorporated all of that other data and insights and information, then I'm just going to decide. But when I decide, and again, it kind of depends on the circumstance, it doesn't mean that that decision is permanent. I'm usually going to go into some sort of an experiment mode. Like, how do we do this in a small way that indicates that it was the right decision?
So it sounds to me like, you're gathering information by asking outside people outside of your own gray matter, and then creating almost like an internal pros and cons in your head, and then making that decision based on the feedback that you have from others.
Yeah, I mean, it's the based on that is sort of the tough part there, right? Because I'm going to incorporate it, but I'm going to ignore it if I want to.
Sure.
There's a lot of intuition that's involved in, leaders making decision as well. And it's not something that I don't use the phrase data-based decision-making, right? Or data decision-making. I say data-informed decision-making because there are other elements that go into decisions. And so I want to be well-informed, but in the end, you have to bring in intuition and experience and a lot of these other factors.
Well, and I can attest to that myself where, you look at the hard data and everything makes sense and points to one direction in a decision, but something deep down inside is saying, don't do it, or, do it, or maybe changing some sort of, thought process in your head. And that's really where that intuition comes in. Because every time that I have gone against my intuition, it's came back to bite me. And so I've always made a decision that if for some reason something doesn't make sense or there's something off about something, I don't care how good the data looks, I'm not doing it.
Right. It's an invitation maybe to go get more information, to run experiments. I think that the thing that I like about when I say experiments, it's very much like the scientific method, right? It's not perfect because we're not really in the world of science when you're doing business related. But I think that the trick is can you form a decision where you're going to believe the evidence is correct, even against your own biases, right? And so where's that line between intuition and bias? Mm-hmm. And so I think that the intuition tells you that you don't have enough information. The intuition says that this doesn't seem like the right thing. And so then the idea is to run experiments to try to figure out what the right thing is.
Yeah.
But it's a hard, this stuff is never going to be boiled down to, if it was easy, other people would be doing it, right? So yeah. It's never going to be easy.
So do you have a book or a resource you've read or you've gone through over the last, couple of years that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
There was a book written by a couple of Navy SEALs called Extreme Ownership that I think has helped me. I think that there have been times in the past where I've maybe relied too much on consensus. And a matter of fact, I do that purposefully now sometimes if it's not a super important decision. And I feel like the wrong choice has been made, I'll let it go because it can be a learning moment. But I think that there's other decisions where, again, you have to gather all the right information, but you have to be the decision maker. And I think that the extreme ownership also sort of demonstrates how that role can change based upon the circumstance, which I thought was pretty interesting.
So shifting gears here a little bit, let's talk about some of the upside that you've had. So is there some place or something that you have done or purchased that you would say is like the most exciting thing that you've done with the money that you've earned up to this point in your life?
What I've done with personally, what I've done with my money? I don't know. I guess I think I'm super fortunate in the sense that I get to travel around the world. And to me, that's the most exciting thing I do in my life is going to great cities around the world and meeting the local people there and having those experiences. And every once in a while, I get to bring my daughters with me, which is just super amazing. And so I've already passed out of the phase of being particularly materialistic or wanting things. And so to me, it's really more about people and relationships and cultures. And so that's the most exciting thing that I've done. And it isn't really related to how much money I make. It is related to how successful the company is and my role in the company.
What's been your favorite city that you've traveled to for your business?
I'm kind of an old European guy. I love the old European cities. So London and Paris, Amsterdam, Barcelona is amazing. A couple of months ago, I went to Tel Aviv, which was an amazing city. But, just sort of, I don't know, culture-wise, I really, the old European cities, I love the narrow cobblestone roads and everybody walking outside of your cars, walking around shops, coffee shops, pubs and all the rest. So I'd have to say London and Paris.
And what's one item on your bucket list right now as far as a place you want to go or something you want to see or do?
So I brought my daughters with me to a business trip in Santiago, Chile, which was amazing. And we went up north a couple of hours up into these deserts that are at super high elevation. And you can actually go horseback riding, camping from that place that we were at. And I think I would love to do that, is to go like off into the Chilean wilderness for 2 or 3 weeks on horseback. Seems like that would be like a lot of fun.
That does sound like a lot of fun. Well, Brant, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to share some of these tough decisions that you've made along the way. How can the listeners reach out to you if they have, further questions after listening to the podcast, or they want to, maybe get some more information from you?
Yeah, sure. Happy to have people reach out. So email address is brant@brantcooper.com, and on all the social media platforms @Brant Cooper. So again, I encourage people to reach out.
Well, again, thank you so much for being with us today, Brant. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too, Dan. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to The Tough Decisions Show.